Hey guys, this is Russ and Ashley, and this is She Wolf Alchemy. And today we are talking about mental health and accountability.
Yeah, we're talking about the misconception that some people have that having a mental health diagnosis removes personal accountability.
Mhm.
Mental health is very complex, and we're not super duper diving into mental health today. We're mostly talking about that accountability piece, the accountability that is still there. I think that this is an important topic because there definitely are people who can try to use their mental health as a get out of jail free card, and there's also people who excuse a lot of things from people around them that maybe they shouldn't because of mental health.
Yeah, I know right now. So this is being recorded post Trump coming into office, and Elon Musk just out here doing Elon Musk type things. And I know I've seen online people being like, he's autistic. I don't think he knows what, and it had, as a clinician, as a person who thinks, it has like pissed me off so much
Mhm.
because I have noticed like there has been this like growing rhetoric around like, oh, if they're an asshole, they're autistic. And they
Mm,
just like combine those
mm,
things like, yeah, because they're autistic, they're asshole. And it's like that's not what that means. That's not
mm,
what that means at all. I have friends who are autistic, amazing human beings.
mm,
But also, I understand, okay, social cues they might not necessarily get. So I might change the way I talk around certain things because I know that they might take this when I'm being sarcastic, that might go over their heads. So I need to be more direct. There's things like that that you change up. It does not mean I'm a bad person and I get to be excused for being a horrible person. And that is like something I keep seeing in spaces around
mm,
that particular diagnosis, especially.
mm, mm. I'm glad you brought that up because I saw that point being made too, and I was like, what the fuck? What they got to do with anything? So on the flip side, we go, no. I'm just sorry, but no. Of all the other things this man has done in his life and career, has been able to, you gonna tell me we're gonna excuse this behavior right here as, oh yeah, but he's autistic. And you're making me think about something I was watching. So my partner loves like YouTube video essays about the most random things.
Mhm.
And so there was one he was watching that was about the Big Bang Theory, which I personally do
The
not find
TV
that show
show?
funny. Or yeah, I
Oh,
don't think
okay.
it's
I thought
funny.
you were talking about the actual theory. I'm like, okay, let's
No,
talk
no,
about
no, the TV show, yeah, yeah. And I personally cannot stand that show, but I don't say I can't stand. I don't think it's funny. I just don't.
it. Fair.
And but they were making this point, like the person was making this point that you're making, that like I guess Sheldon's character is like autistic and he's a nerd or like whatever, and they make it seem like the lack of picking up on social cues just gives him an excuse to be really rude, really sexist, really like just like not a very nice person at all. And it's under this guise of like, oh, but he's so direct and it's because of his diagnosis and that's why, like, so it's meant to be like, oh, it's cute and it's funny, but
Mhm.
it's still sexism. It's still not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like when you talk to people and they're like, they're an absolutely horrible, shitty partner. And they're just like, yeah, but he had childhood trauma. And you're like, yeah, girl, most of us did. And they're like, yeah, no, it's because of his childhood trauma. And he is bipolar. And so
Mhm.
that is
Mhm.
why he cheats. And I'm like, I think he cheats because he's a cheater. I think he cheats because he's probably a cheater. I think he's a horrible person because he's a horrible person. Also, okay, so he knows about this diagnosis. What is he doing? Because there are things you can do to help curb some of this. He's not doing those things. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
The what is he doing is such a major piece people be missing out on. Like, I am grateful to have an understanding of mental health in that way, that like there are things that you can do. And I think, and I'll say our generation because we had to deal with a lot of our male counterparts went off to war when we were
Yeah.
young adults, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something that's a unique thing to millennials. And so I know there's lots of people, especially when I was younger, that like dated that had been to war and came back and they got the PTSD and they got the and but boy, they dragged that thing through the mud for shitty behavior
The
so much.
the way I have been traumatized by Aquarius airman, the way that I was traumatized in my 20s by an Aquarius airman, man in the Air Force. Yes. Yes, with all the
Mhm.
diagnosis. With all the
Yeah,
diagnosis.
yeah. And it's like going through it because I feel like I've gone through it a couple times.
Yeah.
Since initially it's like, oh, you poor thing, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you're so self-aware. Like you know that because of your issues or because of your trauma, you know that it's hard for you to trust you. You know that and then at some point you get to a point where you be like, so what you doing with all this awareness? Because I'm really tired of you just getting to the point of it's my trauma and we ain't getting past that. You're supposed to work through that thing at some point.
Oh,
Where do we try to take steps to become better? Like I get it. Like I want to, and I think most people want to be sensitive and receptive and all of this and understanding, but if you're someone who is in close relation with people with someone who suffered from mental illness, like I think it's like they you need that permission
mhm.
to still challenge that person. You know what
Mm,
I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, because I get why it's hard. Like, I get how it feels insensitive to be like, okay, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But at
Do
the end of
better.
the day, having any type of diagnosis just does not excuse you
Yeah.
from trying to still become a better person because so many things can be worked on. There's not many, I don't want to take too big of a step, but there aren't many diagnoses that you can't improve upon, that you can't learn some skills around, that you can't take a pill for. Like, there's a lot of work that you can do to improve and that's why I also believe that's why, there's been that shift to talking about behavioral health
Mhm.
to like really put an emphasis on the fact that you can change your behaviors and you
Yeah.
can do things differently even though you have this diagnosis. So
Yeah.
there are not many diagnoses. I think the way we think of it is like fixed. Like if
Yeah.
you're a person that has depression, you will always be depressed and that's it and there's nothing that you can do.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who which comes with it. Please don't try to hang me for this. You know what I mean? It's like, I get it that having depression may sometimes mean that you flake on things because today was just not the day. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? It means that you might go into a hole and you don't answer your phone for whatever, or these things happen,
Mhm.
but it doesn't take away the fact that those actions have an impact on people around you.
Yeah.
And so the accountability piece is when you come back up out that hole, that you reach out to your friends and you
Yeah.
say something, anything. And yes, it's great when you have friends that are like, I know she just gets like this around December. Let me go check on her. And they are wonderful people. But it also does not excuse the fact that you are meant to be a participant in these relationships as well.
Yeah. That
And you
part.
kind of got to take some ownership for that.
That part. I completely agree. Um, as someone who struggles with like depression, and I do it in bouts, and I think it's something that I have struggled with in the past, especially when I meet people who have not met me during a depressive episode, because I'll go years. I'll go years
Mm,
being perfectly fine, and then I'll have a really bad depressive episode that will last me months, sometimes up to a year. And I know that has been something hard for me in the past, especially in the past. I've like tried to tell people about it ahead of time.
mhm,
Like, hey, just so you know, I struggle with depression. And they're like, I haven't seen the thing. And it's like, yeah, no, I get it. You might not see for the next 5 years. Who knows? We'll
mhm,
see. But I want you to know this is a thing. I think in my early 20s is not something I handled really well. I remember being in a relationship and it was a serious relationship and they knew this about me because they kind of knew me a bit when I was younger. They knew me when I was a teenager. And so they kind of remember little bits and parts of this. And I had like major depressive episode while we were together. And I feel like I used it as an excuse to just like not participate,
mm,
to just not participate. And I think of back like how horrible that must have been for them to have a fully functioning partner. And then just for several months, I think it probably took me like 6 months before I was like, oh, I need to go to therapy. Oh, I need to get back on antidepressants. Oh, I need to start doing the things.
Mhm.
And for like 6 months, they just had to like, oh, okay. Well, it's been a day 5 of not speaking to me. But I know she's just kind of probably in her room trying to convince herself to get out of bed. And if I want to be a good partner, I just got to accept that.
Mhm.
And really, that's how I thought. I was like, well, if you love me, this is accept it. And I think
Mm.
it wasn't until I was somewhere in like my mid 20s. Matter of fact, being a parent really changed a lot of stuff for me. But it wasn't until I was in my mid 20s, and especially I had a child. And one of the things I was really, really worried about when I was pregnant was because I knew that I was prone to getting depression. I was really worried about postpartum. And I was
Mhm.
really vigilant about it in my pregnancy. Like, hey, this might be a thing. How do I prepare for it and everything? And really, I started going therapy beforehand because I was just anticipating it. I got lucky. I didn't experience it at all.
Mhm.
But I remember like the first relationship I had after that, where again, I did have a depressive episode and how completely different I was.
Mhm.
And how hard it was for me because I remember like telling this person ahead of time, like, hey, so I'm gonna be open and honest and vulnerable with you about I'm on medication. And so there might be a 3-week period. It might take, and I might be lagging. I might not feel the same. Let
Mhm.
me know. And I had to be very diligent about certain things. Like when I'm depressed and I get in a really bad depressive episode, I don't like to do stuff. It is hard to get out of bed. It is hard for me to do basic things. And
Mhm.
so I had to do some of the stuff I went to school for, learn how to do, and organize my day. And okay, well, today there's 3 things you need to accomplish. You need to bathe.
Mhm.
You need to bathe. You need to bathe and you need to eat. And so that's how I would start managing my time. You're in a relationship, you need to call and just check in on them. How's your day? How are you going? Be a participant.
Mhm.
Okay, exercise it does make you feel better, but it's hard to get out of bed. All right, but before the end of this week, you need to have gone for a walk at the very least 3 times. Doing the stuff. And it is such a difference. I would say from that first time I've had one in a major relationship, again, being non-participant and really watching how that slowly ate away at my partner
Mhm.
versus the next time that was a situation, a thing that happened, um, really feel like that was a relationship that was stronger and healthier because I didn't just say, okay, well, now you have to carry the whole load because me and my depression, I'm no longer going to participate. And now again, it's kind of like emotional blackmail. And if you love me, then you just have to stick with it.
Mm. Mm.
And it took some maturity for me to recognize, like, yo, you low key were doing emotional blackmail.
Mm. Mm. That's really deep. I'm glad you shared that because that's real. And also bringing up the point, like I said, like there are things that you can do for maintenance. And I feel like it's one thing when we're like younger and things are new and we don't know, but like after you've spent some time, you've had your diagnosis, like you've managed it, or you actually have done the work to try to manage it, I feel like you should get a little bit more up on it to know. Like I have friends who, know like, okay, the winter is not my time.
Hmm.
And so if I don't go to therapy all year, I'm starting it in November because that's
Hmm.
usually when it kicks off. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Or they start let me get back on meds because I'm starting a new job and I know that the stress
Yeah.
usually kicks off something. And there's people in this, like I have friends who if they didn't tell me, I wouldn't even know because they
Hmm.
do so much to maintain. And like just like you said, they know like if I get thrown off my schedule, it ain't good for nobody. And I got a whole family that I have to be mindful of and I have to take care of. So I can't get thrown off. If I
Yeah.
don't get sleep, I know it's gonna be a problem. So I need to make sure that and I think that too is a part of like what we're talking about overall, accountability.
Yeah.
It's taking accountability to manage. And I think we all are susceptible to having issues with our mental health if we don't take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So we are all responsible for doing those things. And it's not to be like, because I feel like that you have some people who like overcorrect, like for my mental health, I'm not doing this or I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like real, it gets real.
Yeah.
ridiculous up in there. But
They
to
become
not do it
hard to
over.
be around.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, there's lots of clinicians like that.
Yeah, I just got triggered thinking about a couple people, but in general, right. So yeah, we are susceptible to having issues with our mental health when we don't take the time to take care of it, to take care of ourselves, to address problems that come up. And you'll see though, I mean, and again, like life happens, things happen. Like I know when I had an experience where I was like, oh, trauma. And I remember being reluctant to go to therapy because I was like, how dare someone come into my life and traumatize me? I was fine. I will not be going to therapy now. When therapy was like, oh, I had trauma before that that I also wasn't addressing. Well, that is interesting to me as well. But realizing, oh, this is impacting my life. This is impacting my functioning. I have a responsibility to do something about it.
Yeah.
I can't just, because doing nothing was gonna lead was gonna derail my life, and that wasn't okay with me. So I had a responsibility to work on that. I have a responsibility to know what my triggers are. I have a responsibility to do my maintenance when I need it. Like those are things like you have a responsibility there.
Yeah. And I also love that you brought up too, like when you were talking about friends, be like, oh, I know seasonal affective depression is a thing for me. I start getting sad around December. Let me start going to therapy in November. That is a part also of taking accountability. I work with so many people and I get it because I was like this myself. That's like, no, it's fine because I'm not at my bottom yet. So I don't need to take the meds yet. I don't need to go to therapy yet. It's fine because I was way worse the last time I went to therapy and I'm not there yet. And it's like, that's a part of taking accountability as well, especially if you're a person who even if you don't have other people in your life, accountable to self, but especially when you have other people in your life, why do they have to wait till you get to your bottom before you do the things you're supposed to do that should be preventing you from that bottom? I think a lot of times, especially in the Black community, Black and brown communities, we don't trust the doctors. We do not trust antipsychotics. We do not trust just medicines for our mental health. We don't have to go into the whole thing about that. There's a lot I have to say about that, but we don't. And it's very, very common as a clinician working with folks, and they're just like, yeah, I took myself off the Wellbutrin. Okay, why you take
They
yourself off the
love to just
Wellbutrin?
take their stuff off meds.
Or,
Please stop doing that.
or please do. And here's the thing, I get it. You might have done this all the time, like when you were a teen in your early 20s, but like you could have really bad reactions. And then here's the thing, these medicines, it is chemistry. It is working with your brain chemistry. And so, yes, you might have done it before and it had no issues, and it could just take one time. If you just quickly taking yourself off, you had 100 milligram dosage that you was taking twice a day that you just randomly decide to not, and your body can react in really, really strange and scary ways.
What's
Whatever the
good?
case may be, please work with your clinician and your doctor, your psychiatrist, whoever. If you want to take yourself off, that is your right, but do it with someone who knows the proper ways to do that for you. Because again, I know I've done it myself, so I get it. I get randomly waking up and being like, "Feel good," and just want to take yourself off. But also, I want to bring up with that is like, also sometimes we feel good because the medicine's working. So like,
Right.
also keep that in mind.
Literally. And also they're not as needed. Medications, they have not developed that yet. Where it's like, drink today,
Unless you
I
have
feel
ADHD, those are
well,
as
okay.
needed.
Well,
Some
most things
anxiety meds are as needed.
are not just like, ah la la, I feel, but I'm good. So, because the amount of times I done see people, yeah, get into some situations because they're like, well, I only take it when that's not how this med works. So, I guess what we're all saying is medication management is a thing, it is a skill. You should learn it if you are prescribed anything. You need to learn how to manage it, you need to learn what is safe for you to do, how to taper off if that's whatever. You need to be working with someone to help you through that instead of just like flim flamming it like I just started cutting my pills in half. Look.
No,
Pause,
really.
okay?
No, really. No, really. Because the things I have heard, like, we did what? Who
Yeah.
who who did you discuss this with? Me and Tanya. Does Tanya have a medical degree? No, she does not. Okay, why are we consulting Tanya? She found a Reddit forum about it. Like,
Mm,
girl,
you taking pictures. I love Reddit, but
I
there are
know.
yes, I heard.
Every now and then I come across on my feeds. Because usually I'm there for like astrology, esoteric type stuff. So I'm like, yeah, solving universe mysteries. And then I'll randomly get one that's just like, hey, I have bipolar disorder. I read out my meds. If I take my partner's Haldol, will it have the same effect? And it's just like eight people like think so. And I'm like, yo.
No. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I've definitely come across people who are like, yeah, my mom took the same pill for years. So I just she do this, so I do this. Whoa, whoa.
But getting back to the subject at hand, you don't have to wait until like you're at your worst either. That's going to be a part of like that being accountable to self. If you're a parent, being accountable because you have people that's depending on you, even in partnerships, you should not have to wait till your crash out moment. Now, for some of us, we don't know, right? If this is your first time having an episode, or maybe it looks different this time, maybe last time you thought it was triggered by that heartbreak and you're like, I'm fine. This I don't know. Especially again, going back to my women of color, depression often looks very different from us. I think a lot of times, I know me particular when I'm speaking to women of color, we have this idea in the head that, like, again, a lot of times my depression looks like it's hard for me to get out of bed and stuff. And so people assume it's I can't do nothing, I can't function. So I must not be depressed because I'm still getting up and going to work. I'm still doing this stuff. And it's like, right, but like you no longer found enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But like now we only take care of our hygiene once every 4 days. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But like, and it can look like a functional depression where especially again, women of color, a lot of times we have grown up in households where it has been ingrained in us, you still do your duties. You don't have the privilege to not do your duties.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes because of that, by time clients get to their therapist or psychiatrist, or sometimes it could be so far gone because you were having symptoms like 6, 7 months ago that you ignored because you were like, well, I mean, maybe I'm just having trouble sleeping because, life's hard. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
just stop enjoying stuff because I don't know. I'm just going through a funk. I'm just like Papa. That's what Papa is like. And we wait until we get to that crash out period. A part of taking that accountability is once you've had a cycle, start looking at what your cycle looks like and start pinpointing and having kind of a backup plan. Like, okay, I know for me, that's one of my things. When I stop wanting to engage with my community, when I stop finding joy in things, when I start sleeping a lot, that's when I'm like, uh-oh, hold on, let me check the temperature because I know what this is the start of.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's a pattern of accountability. Doing that check in, recognizing what your symptoms are, and start doing the things, getting the help before you get to that dark place. You don't always have to wait for the crash out.
Mm-hmm. I also want to note, because we talked about like kind of like having a diagnosis doesn't just give you a pass, but also if you are experiencing things and you're noticing some things, getting an actual diagnosis, I think is a part of that accountability as well.
Mhm.
Because yes, you can watch the wrong video too long on one of the media apps, social media, and you will get sent everything that have you going down a rabbit hole and come out like, I know I have buzzword diagnosis. And you have not been to nobody's professional to sit down and actually address it. And people will literally just diagnose themselves and go throughout their life doing nothing,
Mhm.
but calling themselves whatever their new diagnosis is they believe they have. Um, that is not taking accountability.
Mhm.
Actually, if you truly believe that you have something, go see a professional. And yes, I know that, like you were saying earlier, like a lot of people are mistrusting of doctors and things like that. I'm one of the people. I'm terrible going to the doctor and wanting an extra opinion, whatever. I know I'm bad at it. And I recently, especially having a child, I was like, you can't do that anymore because you can't risk it.
Yeah.
We gotta just do it. Even though it pissed me off when I go. There are things that happen that make me be like, see, this is why. But I know I can't take that risk. I have a child. I need to be trying to do things as close to the line as I can
Yeah.
because hey, things need to be addressed. But yeah, please do not. self-diagnose. That's, to me, that's not being responsible or accountable at all. Like, if you think there's something going on, go. If you go and you have a not so great experience or you don't feel heard, go to someone else. Like, you owe it to yourself to keep trying, but
Shop
please do
around.
not. Yeah, shop around, like go somewhere else. I came across, talk about threads. What was I reading? I think it was on Reddit, like an autism Reddit. Lord, I don't know. I don't know how I got there. Reddit puts you all kind of places.
It does.
Um, but someone was like asking if it would be inappropriate to buy her friend like a t-shirt that says something like got the tism or whatever.
Mhm.
And she's like, my friend doesn't have an actual diagnosis. She just thinks she does. And she refers to herself as this. So I think getting her this t-shirt would be like fun and witty. But am I being offensive to the autism community? And people were like, girl, what the fuck? Like, what the hell is wrong with your friend
Yeah.
and you? Go either get a diagnosis or move on. Like, what
Mhm.
are we doing?
Yeah. And like I get it. It is hard to get a diagnosis. I get with autism. First, let me just say the way TikTok made life hard for therapists during the pandemic because all y'all was making videos like I like to match my socks to my hat. Tism.
Or the more current one I see, I'm so OCD. I like to have all my shoes lined up. I'm so OCD, bruh. If you have seen someone really experience
Yeah.
obsessive compulsion,
Mhm.
please, please miss me with that nonsense. We're
And
not.
like, here's the thing: you can't just read the DSM-5 and be like, okay, and now I know this stuff.
No.
You can't. There's a reason why you have to go and get a bachelor's, and then you have to go and get a master's, and then you have to do an internship, and then you have to do 3 years, depending on what state you're in, of supervision before you can get your license to diagnose. Like, there's a reason there's all these steps, and it's because it's not as simple as just reading a book. Also, sometimes there's people who have been in therapy for long periods of time. They're like, "I've been in therapy since I was 5, so I know how to diagnose this." But also, I need y'all to understand, like, a lot of time diagnosis is opinion based. Now, yes, it's based on a book, and then we have certain codes and regulations that we go through, and you have to check out. You have to have these things, blah blah blah. But I can't tell you how many times, especially when we used to work in the jails,
Mm-hmm.
and I would see somebody's diagnostic history, and it
Oh,
went from everything from,
all
like,
over the place.
anxiety to
Yeah,
borderline to
yeah.
schizophrenia to depression to all over the place. You'll be looking at one person's sheet, and you'll see in 5 years they had several diagnoses that are nowhere near related.
And come to find out, it was substance abuse the whole time. If you stop
Oh my
doing
gosh,
something,
it's always
your
substance
brain,
abuse.
okay?
Oh, the subject. Oh, the infuriating subject. Um, but yeah, so like, yes, definitely go and get your diagnosis. And I get it. There's some diagnosis that it feels pointless to get as an adult because you get told, like, okay, for example, with autism, it feels sometimes pointless, I think, for people because it can be expensive. One, because when you're an adult, a lot of times your insurance doesn't want to pay for it because they feel like if you had it, it should have been caught as a child. But if you're a millennial, um, there's a lot of diagnosis I feel like we that went past us that we just did not get. Like, for example, I know for myself, I had great grades growing up, but I had teachers who mentioned to my parents they thought I had ADHD. My parents was just like, "She make A's and B's, it don't matter." I also had a teacher who one time was like, "Hey, we want Russ to get texted for dyslexia," but my parents made me read all the time, and they're like, "She good, she read, she know how to do stuff. It's fine." And I think a lot of millennials, we have that type of experience,
Mhm.
where there was kind of some stuff, but you kind of grew up in households where they're just like, ain't nothing wrong with my baby.
Yeah,
They try to
yeah.
put my baby in a basement classes. Ain't nothing wrong with my baby.
They was
And
just like,
so,
because she's black.
yeah. And so we got bypassed a lot of things, but unfortunately, when you become a doctor, there are certain diagnoses that if you didn't have it when you're a child, the resources just really aren't there. And so I get
Mhm.
why there's certain ones that people are slower at, drag their feet on. I recently just helped a person get a diagnosis for autism, and we had to do a whole process. Oh, I had to do so many emails. Me and Chat GPT was just cranking out emails, cranking out things to get this thing sorted. And I get like it can be like, okay, but now, okay, even if I get the diagnosis, now I just have the diagnosis, and now what? Because a lot of the sources for things like autism, for like ADHD are geared towards school. So if you're not in school, it
Mhm.
kind of feels like pointless. But if you really feel like, and here's the thing when we're talking about diagnosing, I know we said we wouldn't get too far in mental health, but it's always about how much does this disorder affect the person's life? That's what
Mm.
we're looking at when we're diagnosing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because a lot of us have a little bit of anxiety. I get a little worried before I take the test. I get a little anxious before when it's raining outside and I get in a car. Okay, but is it at a severe enough level that is
Mhm.
causing significant distress in my life? And so if you are saying like I'm worried, I need to get diagnosis. Okay, then if it is causing significant distress, because that's
Mhm.
what we're going to be looking at to diagnose you, then it's always worth it. Even if
Mhm.
you're like, I don't really know what the resources are, I don't really know what I can do with it. Again, a part of that accountability is if I notice there is something going on in my mental health and it's causing me enough distress that is making me hard, it's making it hard for me to function at my baseline.
Mhm. Yeah.
Call in, and we have so many resources. You can literally ask Chat GPT, hey, I do this, this. Who do I need to talk to about this? They'll say psychiatrist, they might say therapist, they might say ABA, ABA specialist.
Mhm.
But there's things that you can do, um, but sitting with it and say, "I read on Reddit," or, "Well, I bought my own DSM-5, and I think I have it." It's so much more complex than that.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. That like it can be more challenging for certain things, but depending on how much it's impacting your life, it is definitely worth it because I have seen people struggle with just, like work, struggle trying to get through work, lose jobs, all sorts of things. Whereas in, you can have ADA protections for certain things, or there's accommodations that you could be asking for. And so having that actual diagnosis allows you to have those conversations.
Yeah,
And you can't have them with a Reddit diagnosis. You need to, you know. And so it could be a pain, but it also could be worth. And also for a lot of people, it's also just validating to like have that peace, have those answers to be able to even just look back through your life and be like, oh, so that's why this was like that, or to be able to do the necessary research to learn how to manage things better. Like, yeah, it's definitely worth the work.
yeah, I agree.
So, taking accountability, I believe, is very empowering.
Mhm.
Like, it's not meant to be like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, no, no, no. No, it could actually be like empowering, like we were talking about earlier, like knowing more about yourself to be able to put yourself in a good position to manage so that your life is not crumbling every 6 months when something comes up or
Yeah,
when your diagnosis flares up or when we have an episode or whatever the case may be. Being able to be proactive in your relationships with other people, um, putting things in place for you to be successful. Like it is empowering to take that level of accountability.
yeah. And here's the thing is you don't have to be perfect with it. It's not saying that, okay, I'm being accountable, I'm being responsible, and that means like I'm gonna always get it right. I'm gonna always have a strategy. I'm always have a plan. It's always gonna be growth. No, again, we recognize that you are struggling with your mental health, and so there are going to be setbacks. There's are going to be parts that's going to be harder. It might be it take me a minute to kind of relook at my what I did, what I said, and be like, "Ooh, dang, I do need to go back to that." And I want to put that in there because I think so much when we talk about healing, we forget that grace part. And grace is such a big part of healing. I have seen so many people kind of just go far in their healing journey and then just mess up at one point and they throw the whole thing away because it
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm a fraud. I really wasn't healing that good because if I was, I would have blah blah. And they're so harsh on themselves. Accountability is not about being perfect, but it is about am I constantly working towards trying to find that baseline, trying to get back to that baseline, trying to again just own up to okay, this is where I might be falling short, but this is what I can do. This is the workaround I could try to do for that. And then again, sometimes it's even like avoiding situations. If I know this particular thing or this particular person is very triggering to me, it might just be okay. I will no longer put myself in those positions. I will no longer be there. I feel like I got way off track with that. But responsibility does not have to be perfection.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think when we're talking about like having mental health challenges, we have to understand where there needs to be a recognition of there is a certain point where our mental health challenges end and personal choices begin. Um,
Mhm.
I can know that I am struggling with my mental health, right? I can know that I am very anxious or I'm very depressed and I'm going through a certain thing. However, there is an option for the way that I treat the people near me, right? So yes, I might be stressed. It might be hard for me to get out of bed. It might be hard for me to do my very basics, but I at some point I can recognize like, okay, I'm not in the right space today. And so when my girlfriend is coming to me and it's just like, hey girl, I want to talk to you, that'd be a good time. Like, hey, I'm not in the mood right now where I can handle additional information. I'm
Mhm.
kind of going through something, kind of give me a moment instead of putting myself in a situation where I go off and then go, well, you know how I am with my mental health. And you just come here and you dumping this stuff on me. At some point, I know that I was feeling bad. I know I was not in the mood for that. And
Mhm.
I can have the option to then withdraw myself from certain situations and say, hey, not right now. I don't have the capacity to deal with this and come back to it. And I think even going into that of like, if I know historically I don't do good on my meds
Mhm.
and I just pull myself off my medication because I say, I don't like how my meds make me feel. I feel a little bit drowsy on them. And that is your right. You can say that. But also, one of your choices is to talk to your provider and say, hey,
Mhm.
I don't feel like myself. Is there anything else we can try? Is there anything else I can do? I think sometimes with this one, it can be a little bit harsher because it's like, okay, maybe I have this med, I don't have side effects. One of the things, especially when I used to work in the hospitals, when I work in a psychiatric hospital, one of the things I used to see all the time is my men. The minute y'all penis stop working, y'all ready
Oh,
to stop taking those medicines.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
minute y'all penis stop working, y'all like, I don't care. Everybody gonna have to suffer because I'm trying to get it in. I don't care. All y'all gotta suffer because I need to get this thing back up. Um, and at some point though, we have to recognize like, okay, this is me making a personal choice.
Mhm.
And when we have this fallout, it can't be, well, because y'all know I suffered with my bipolar, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also at some point, you made the decision to not talk to your psychiatrist and say, hey, can we switch on something? Can we do something a little bit lower? Can we?
Mhm.
This is the issue. I can't live like this. What else you got? Okay, but the doc gave me pushback. Shop around.
Mhm. Yeah. There's things you can try and other things you can do. I also say when I think about like where's that line between like your because that line between like your mental health and the effects or the symptoms of it and you making a personal choice that may or may not be good for you,
Mhm,
like doing things like compulsively, like a thought just came to me. I'm thinking about a woman who making decisions such as I don't know, you're like choosing to commit a crime. Like,
mhm,
for example, I don't even know how to say it. Like, I've come across who is committing financial fraud,
mhm,
right? Stealing other people's money to fuel whatever. I don't know, but it was a crime and it was harmful to others. And then was like, it's because I was depressed. And when I'm depressed, I like to shop. No. It does not absolve you of the fact that you committed
mhm.
crimes that were also harmful towards other people.
Yeah.
Your diagnosis does not absolve you of that. I
Yeah.
need us to like see the difference between, there's and not to say everyone's depression looks the same, but
Mhm,
also because and this circles even back around to talking about like certain stigmas. Like you're also not helping all the other people with this diagnosis either, because then people this is where people start to think, oh, you have this compulsion where you just can't help yourself but to
mhm.
do things that are bad or terrible or whatever the case may be. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Like you still have some choice in the matter in how you behave and how you conduct yourself
Yeah.
or how you act out whatever or how you allow your symptoms to impact your everyday life. Like you have some choice in the matter.
Yeah.
It's not okay. Like it's frustrating to me when people assume that someone with a mental health diagnosis, especially like bipolar or schizophrenia, things like that, when people assume that they're violent, like that
Yeah.
pisses me off because it's not true. Like there are
Yeah.
plenty of people walking around here with those diagnoses that you would not know because because they're managing it just fine. But because we have that, a lot of people have that misconception, it
Mhm.
hinders people from actually getting the help that they need. It
Yeah.
hinders people from being allowed to access resources that they need. I can't even tell you the times I have stood in court trying to get someone the freedom that they deserved,
Mhm.
and it was being challenged because, oh well, they have this mental health
Yep.
diagnosis, so how do we know they're not gonna,
Yep.
get out here and shoot someone? What the hell? Where do you get that from? How
Never in
did
the history have they have any
they
background on
ever done that?
them being violent, but because they hear that. And you know what's crazy about that is like, and when I was in grad school, I had a professor who made us read some articles about schizophrenia and how it presents in other countries. And
Mm-hmm.
there was like a period of time, I don't know if this is still true. It's been a couple years, y'all. It's been almost a decade. But people with schizophrenia in a lot of these like other countries, it was like 5 different countries. I don't remember which ones, but their delusions or their hallucinations and so forth
Delusions, yeah.
were typically happy. And in
Mm,
these countries, a lot of times when they think of schizophrenia, it's kind of like, oh, they're jolly. They just be off giggling according to themselves. But in America, theirs
mm,
tend to present as very hyper religious,
mm-hmm.
as very um
A lot of paranoia.
paranoid, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why he had us do this was also to look at, like, how our society affects that. Like, if you're in a
Mm-hmm.
society, though, that where, like, you can't trust your government, like, you can't then when you
Yeah.
are having a mental episode, it will make sense that's impacting how I'm seeing things versus if I'm in a society
Mm-hmm.
where I have free
Mm-hmm.
housing or I have affordable housing, I have free healthcare, I have, access to goods and needs and so forth, then I'm less likely to have those type of delusions. So I thought that was
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. Another that feeds into those misconceptions and drives me insane too is like it's fucking podcast and it's media, like entertainment. It
As we
drives me
sit
crazy.
on the podcast.
I mean,
Yeah.
we try to be responsible with our
No,
content.
for
Like I personally like I know there are people who love true crime. That is their jam. Me personally, I'm more of a soft they call it soft crime. Like I'm further like, oh, they committed a scam, like it was bad and it harmed people, but like I don't want to hear about a bludgeoning or whatever. But I can't there was some that I came across and I remember like the whole theme of the podcast was like people with mental health diagnoses who were murdering people. And I was like, bruh, please.
yeah,
Like
we don't need
not a great look. Or even in like movies where oh God, I hate a lot of movies that are like based on some thriller novel because I just can't read those either. But it'll be like there's this guy and he's like a little twitchy and he's killing everyone.
yeah,
Why? Because he grew up in foster care, and that's the only reason that they give us. And they'll come up. They might throw a, oh, he was diagnosed with bipolar when he was 10. Oh, that's
mhm,
why. That's
yeah,
why. And that's it. And that is shit writing, in my opinion. Very weak
completely.
storyline, and it perpetuates a horrible misconception
Mhm,
of those diagnoses. I really can't stand it. So, even being mindful of what you're taking in
mhm.
and being critical of this info that you're getting from all these sensationalized
Yeah.
podcasts and TV shows and movies, like
Yeah, because I do think it also impacts your ability, especially if you struggle with mental health. The only examples I've seen of people of my diagnosis is
mhm.
it looks a certain way. It can make you feel really bleak. I remember I had a professor who had a colleague of his who was a professor and had schizophrenia. And
Mhm.
she came through and she talked about her journey of like being diagnosed in her, I think she was like in her late 30s, 40s when she had her first
Mm.
episode, which is very rare.
Mhm.
And talking about like, yeah, and I still have my job. I got on the right meds, I got on the right treatment, I got on the right things. I had a year where it was rough,
Mhm.
but luckily she had colleagues and bosses and community that was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is going to be hard, but they can do it. And they're like, and I just did the things that helped me to get better and I stuck through them. And now by the time we met her, she had been like 20 years something of like living with
Mhm.
this diagnosis. And it's like for the most part, and she was like, I live a pretty normal life, but I maintain the things. I know there's certain things that I know when I start feeling extremely paranoid about certain things, I might need to talk to my psychiatrist and let them know, like, hey,
Mhm.
I noticed that I'm a little bit more jumpy. I'm noticing that I'm starting to see things that aren't, doing the things.
Mhm.
And going back to when we're talking about understanding when mental health challenges and the personal choices begin, recognizing that yes, your mental health may have played a part of it, but the way I always try to, and I love that Ashley brought up like court, because both me and her have worked in the court systems before. I have somebody in my life that like that's what I say to them. I'm just like, okay, before you go out and do this thing, if you explain your reason behind it to a judge, would they care? Would it
Uh-huh.
matter?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm even thinking now, like I have somebody in my life right now who I care about tremendously, who's extremely important to me, who really did struggle with their mental health over the last 2 years, like really, really harshly. Um, and it took us all by surprise. And it was really scary. It's really scary and touch and go there for a good chunk of last year. And they got better and they got better and they start doing the things. They were in therapy, they were taking the medications, they were reading their books, they were meditating, they were going for exercise, like they were really doing the stuff. And
Mhm.
personal choice came in, and there was
Mhm.
something that they know triggered this whole thing. And they had told them, they took themselves off their meds and they told themselves, I'm strong now, I'm good now, I will put myself in this situation and I will resist. And now they done got themselves in more trouble.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's something that, we are working through. It's something that we are powering through. And recently me and them had to have a conversation because they did get themselves they got themselves in some legal trouble.
Mhm.
And when they were talking to me about it, because they did something that's outside of themselves, outside of the version of them a lot of people close to them knew. Um, and we had to have a conversation about accountability. And I'm like, look, I get you are going through this period. I get that you're triggered. I know where your mental health was at this time. And I do believe you were triggered. I do believe that if you were in a right frame of mind, you would not have done these things. However, you did.
Mhm.
And now you have to just be accountable for the things that you did.
Mhm.
Can bring up that your mental health played a part, but also there's certain consequences because you did put yourself in a situation where other people were involved and other people now had to pay for
Mhm.
your personal choice.
Yeah.
Even though I do think there was a point that after they made that choice, their mental health spiraled and they caused a whole bunch of other actions. But the truth of the matter is, you put yourself in you made a personal choice
Mhm.
to put yourself in this position that you knew could
Mhm.
trigger that. And you decided to. And I know that seems harsh. And I know for some people, they're like, but that's not fair. They know, blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, that is the way the world works. And so
Mhm.
you kind of have to look at it that way. Because as much as we want to say, well, it's because of this and da da da, there are certain circumstances where the world don't care. And you just have to deal with the consequences of that. And so take the accountability on the front end. So speaking of that, I think when we're talking about accountability with our mental health, I think it is important to have a support system, an external support system. This could be your family, this could be your friends, it could be therapists, this can be a group, but have people who will kind of work with holding you accountable, but while offering compassion still. And I know sometimes it's harsh because depending where we are in our mental health, and I recognize that for some of us, again, I admit it myself, we weren't always that accountable. And so there might be people in your life who they don't want to do it with compassion. They tired of you.
Mhm.
But it's important to make sure you have some people in your corner who still have some compassion for you.
Mhm.
Not so you can walk over these individuals, not so you can abuse that compassion, but people who will kind of be like, okay, I'm noticing.
Yeah.
Are you? I know sometimes people get really mad. I actually saw, I can't remember what it was. It was a clip on TikTok. It was some movie. And the guy had asked the woman if she had took her meds that day.
Yeah.
And people in the comments like, I hate that. And it's da, da, da,
Yeah.
da. But from what I saw in the clip, and I have never seen this movie before, but from what I saw, she had did something to make a person ask, like, you
Yeah.
never acted as your normal self. Did you take your meds? And people were in the comments like going off. They're horrible, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's important to have the people in your life. And again, I get it. There is a line that people can abuse that. There is a
Yeah.
line where every single time you do something they don't like, you
Yeah.
gotta take your meds, probably because you didn't go to therapy yesterday. And that's not what I'm talking about, but y'all know what we're talking about in moderation. So have those people who are still going to hold you accountable, that are going to be
Yeah.
like, you've been acting a little off. I am a little bit concerned. I'm starting to noticing the last time you had an episode, you was doing these things, and you starting to do these things. Like,
Yeah.
what's good?
People
Let's do a check in.
that you can trust, that
Mhm.
if they're asking you, you might need to take a minute to reconsider. But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely have a friend who expressed that, was like that, and I was like, yo, that's crazy. I can see how that would be very upsetting, because they
Mhm.
were like, I can't have a bad day. If I have a bad day, people are like, oh, did you take your meds? Yes, I took my goddamn med, and I can still be upset about this thing that happened.
It's
Like, come
prevent
on.
sadness. Sad things happen. I'm gonna be sad.
Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, definitely having a support system of people that you trust, that yeah, if that person, like, if you check in with them and they're like, you sound a little manic there, friend. Are
Mhm.
you okay? That you can trust their judgment on that. But also, if you are that support system, if you are that family member, that loved one to someone who has mental health struggles, being mindful that of the difference between actually like helping and holding them accountable versus like helping them versus enabling them
Yes, or shaming them.
or shaming them. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do this wrong, unfortunately. I mean, being real, but yeah, enabling is not the route to go. Like I think you pointed out earlier, like you're not meant to be someone's doormat. Like, oh well, they're going through it, so I guess I just no,
Mhm.
no, no. And not enabling people is sometimes having boundaries with them and saying like, hey, um, can't do that here, friends. You gotta go and like address this or that, or I can't allow you to treat me this way just because you're going through whatever. So I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna go home. I hope that you will do ABCD. That's your
Mhm.
business, whatever you choose to do. But I'm gonna step away.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go home because I'm not gonna sit here and or however it is that you deal with that. But definitely want to make sure that you're not. And enabling can also look like offering those excuses
Mhm.
when you know good and well someone is wrong and they need to check themselves, and instead you go, well, he got the
Mhm.
whatevers, whatever the diagnosis. We know they got the whatever, and my mind always goes back to romantic partnerships, because I feel like it happens so much kind of undercover. It
Mhm.
happens in friendships, it happens in all relationships, but I just think about that one so much because I just think about, I know so many people who excuse partners or someone they're dating or whatever. It's like god awful behavior because of a diagnosis, like,
Mhm.
you know, and they allow people to hold things over. If you leave me, I'm gonna kill myself. That is not okay.
That is emotional manipulation.
It's horrible. This is
Mhm.
not okay for someone to hold that over you. Don't let anybody hold that over you, and do not feel bad for their personal choices of what they are going to do with their life. If you don't want to be in that relationship no more, don't be in it.
Mhm. That
Staying is not helping them. It's enabling their nonsense.
and that is a big one. I wanna make sure we point that out there, that if you are someone's support system, you are on that, and it becomes too much for you, it is okay for you to take a step back. You are not their mental health professional.
Mm-hmm.
You're not their mental health professional. You're not their you. and I wanna say that because I think sometimes people like, "But I'm all they have, but I'm all they
Mm,
have,"
mm,
and I have seen people get drugged down
yeah.
into some stuff that first
Mm,
started with somebody
mhm,
else's things, and it is okay to say, I can't handle this.
mhm,
I am not trained to handle this,
mhm,
and I need to take a step back from my friendship. I need to stay back from my relationship, whatever it is, if it becomes too much.
mhm.
With that being said, I know the people who are like, "Hey, y'all told us to have a support team. You just told our support team to walk away." That's not what we're saying, but
Not at
we're
all.
saying if you are putting these people at harm, but also your support team should conclude a professional.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you well, yeah, your support system should not be, and I know for some people it's challenging to keep people around, but this is also why having accountability and managing yourself so you can manage these relationships is also important, right? Because your entire thread to sanity should not be based on one person. um and you as that person, you should not be somebody's one sole and only reason for living or taking their like, that is not healthy. That is not a healthy relationship for either of you. And if you're experiencing that, and and this is a person you love and can't live without, encourage them to expand. Hey, I am your lover, I am not your clinician. I cannot talk to you about this. And especially those of us who are in the mental health field, it is so easy for someone to
Mhm.
try to give you a dual role in their life. No, I'm not that. Go get a doctor. Doctors don't date their patients. No, this is not how this works. You need to go see somebody else. You can go talk to other people. You need a support group. I don't know what you need, but I can't be your end all be all. I am here for this role in your life.
No one should be your everything. Not your kids, not your parents, not your partner, not your friends. No one should be your everything. It is important, and I know every episode we talk about community, but
Hmm.
community is so important. Like, I won't lie, this last year, I have been swamped with, like,
Hmm.
work and just life-changing things happen, and so I have not been out as much. Actually, I recently posted on Instagram. It had, like, this, like, throwback thing. It was like, "Show me your
Hmm.
era of 2022." And I had so many pictures because I was outside. I was outside 2022.
Hmm.
But it made me think like, "Dang, I have not been outside 2024." I really
Hmm.
have not been really occupied, but at the end of the day, I still keep it enough contact that I know if I need something, I can reach out to my community and they'll be there because I still participate enough as a participant, and it's important to have that. Even when you're like, I'm more of an isolated person. I'm going through a lot, or I'm just really busy." That's okay. I get it. I'm a person that's like that a lot, but you still need to keep in contact and have community. Y'all used to talking 4 days a week. Okay, maybe you are not in a space where you can do that, but do a check-in.
Hmm.
Let people know you're there, that you're okay, that you're going through things. Build up a community. But also, I want to say, as a person who personally hates groups, just why? Not a fan of groups. But also, if you are like, I don't really have a community, I don't really, it's just me and my therapist, and my mama. We trying, consider doing groups.
Hmm.
Consider doing groups. It is a great way to one, meet other people who are going through the same things or have the same diagnosis as you, struggling with the same issues that you might be struggling with. And it can give you a sense of community and a sense of accountability when you're working with a good team, a group of people like that. There's lots of rules in place to try to keep the group as emotionally safe as possible. But I have found that especially people I've worked with who are just like, I don't have a community. Like, girl,
Hmm.
just you and me. You my therapist, you use all the community. Try looking into groups and stuff. It can
Hmm.
make a world of difference.
Also, I want to point out, because I know, like, I want to point out your kids also cannot be your end all be all reason for living. And I know, like, I say that because I know that is like a heavy motivation that people like to throw out. And it's I'm not saying don't let your kids inspire and motivate you. They
Mhm.
can, it's great. But you cannot put your whole like, it's I'm doing this for them. I'm only doing this for them, because they're their own individuals and they have their own life that they're trying to grow up and live, and that can manifest in so many different ways. Sometimes it could cause very unhealthy attachment styles between
Mhm.
you and your child. Some people unload way too much personal information onto their kids. They cannot handle. They're not here for that.
Mhm.
Um, but also the other thing is, like I said, I think the biggest thing is like they're their own people,
Mhm.
and they're not here to support your mental health. They're gonna grow up. They're gonna be selfish in their own ways. They're gonna do these things, and your whole reason for living cannot be dependent on a fickle child. I need you guys to like really understand that.
Yeah.
Um, I especially see it, which I believe substance abuse is a mental health condition, and we need to go deep into that because it does go into a whole other, that's a whole other ball game.
Mhm.
But that's a thing. Like people would be like, I want to get sober for my kids. Your child is 17. Okay, you can get sober. Oh goddamn time,
I'll do this
please.
with you, Ashley.
I'm being for real because that's a real thing. It
I
drives me
know, but we
crazy.
can't go down this rabbit hole.
I'm not. I'm
You got
not.
a you got a
I'm
you got
just.
a sick baby in the background.
I do.
I'm on 3 hours of sleep. We can't go this place.
I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, I'm gonna leave it alone. But okay, my point is just that do not put that on your children. They do not
Yeah.
deserve that. They cannot be your sole reason for getting it together,
Mhm.
or for trying to do this. It really does have to come from you, from within.
Yeah.
Um, and that's it. Please don't put that type of pressure on your child.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's also just briefly add into that because I think for so many people, I've talked to people with this mindset, and it's just like, no, because if it wasn't for them, I would have. And don't get me wrong, my child definitely changed my life. I became a better person once I became a parent. I truly, truly believe that. However, long term, I could see how, again, like Ashley said, it could play out in many ways. And it could play out with like, okay, they turn 18 though, and now they about to be able to do their own life. And you are like, but what? But you just about leave me? I'm just alone. I'm just what you why aren't you answering my phone call whenever I call all the time? All the way because it can just it might feel like okay now, and it might feel like no, it's the only thing making me better now. But again, like Ashley really pointed out, is that they eventually they're their own people. And even
And
if they don't, let's say they
codependency.
stay home, they live with you forever, why cripple that child with your issues? I
Mhm,
can't do anything because daddy, if I leave and go to school and fulfill my dream, I don't know what's gonna happen to daddy.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So yes, not make your children, and not make your partner for sure. End
Please.
all be all. So essentially, what we're saying is part of taking accountability is working with a professional, sticking to your treatment plans. If you are feeling like I'm being ran over, I don't like my professional, I don't like the treat, shop around. You can find other people, but build a support team. One of the big things in mental health right now, especially if you get services through like the community, is we have wraparound teams. We have interdisciplinary teams where you get a case manager, you get a therapist, you get a life coach, you might get a probation officer, depending who I'm talking to. You get a lot of professionals that work with you. And the reason why that is so popular in community mental health is because we see it works when you have more than one thing and one person, just one thing to depend on for your health. And there's ways that even if, okay, I have private insurance, I can't really get community type help, that you can implement that yourself. Seek out a therapist. I don't really have time. I don't have a car. There's online therapy. Well,
Mhm,
I don't know, and it's too expensive. I got some clients I see right now via online therapy, and their copay is $7.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Check it out before you say, I can't. Check it out. Look into it. If you have a mental health diagnosis where you might need medication, consider the medication.
mhm,
Work with somebody that will tiptoe you on it. I can't. You don't have to start off on 75 milligrams. They will start you off on 5.
mhm.
And just make sure it's okay. Then we'll do that for a month, and then let's move you up to 10. You can work with somebody that does that. Continue building your self-awareness, and you can do that through mindfulness, through meditation, through grounding techniques, but also journaling is a really good way to do that. Write down your thoughts so you can come back and remember the state of mind you were in during that time, and you can see the progress of your growth. I think sometimes we feel like we aren't moving or things are the same, and it's because we don't remember what it was where we really were mentally a month ago, 3 months ago, 5 months ago. And journaling can be such a good way to keep track of that progress. So you can see, oh wait, no, dang, this medication is making a difference because I was thinking about calling Chris 3 months ago. I ain't thought about Chris. I'm thinking about crashing out on
Mm.
Chris in the last 80 days. That's good. That's process. Another thing you can do is create systems mitigate challenges. For example, I know me, I've talked about this before. Y'all see me in the comments whenever we have a meme about ADHD. There are certain things you can do to help mitigate some of the challenges with ADHD. For me, it is keeping a schedule. For me, I have timers that go off for everything because I will get sidetracked. I'll start doing other things. But you can create systems that help you kind of, again, just mitigate some of those challenges. And if you are a loved one that is trying to help a person who's struggling with their mental health, again, try to encourage that accountability without trying to put in shame.
Mhm.
Shame does not work for the long term. I know a lot of us probably grew up with parents that were big on shaming. She said, okay, I guess you just gonna let them think your mama ain't raised you right. You gonna just let these people think I was out here just not taking care of you. That type of stuff does not work long term. It is
Mhm.
a temporary make me feel bad, I might act right for this moment type of thing, but people need to be loved and feel safe to make the type of changes that create lasting change for them. So, working with do they have groups for families and loved ones if you have someone dealing with um, a mental health condition. NAMI has groups nationally. They have some virtually, they have some in person that can help you if you're like, I don't even know where to start. There's also therapists that will help you and work with you on that as well. But also, while we're talking about being empathetic and trying to love them through it, on to your boundaries.
Mhm.
It is okay to say no.
Mhm.
It is okay to recognize you are putting yourself in danger, you're putting me in danger, and I want nothing to do with that. Figure out what your boundaries are before you get in the moment. Recognizing, like, okay, this is somebody that I know, their temper flares up. And when their temper flares up, it gets violent. Okay, then having that boundary of like, no, the minute you start raising your voice, we're ending this phone call. Or I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to get out of my house. We can have this conversation later. But figuring out what boundaries you need to have with them and holding strong to. So that is all that we have for today's message. We hope that you guys enjoyed. Follow us on Instagram at She Wolf Alchemy. I mean, you can try to follow us on TikTok. It's not the same. She Wolf Alchemy podcast. And we'll have a new episode for you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.